Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Wednesday, about 5:30 a.m. It's pretty early. It's one of those days where, you just can't quite sleep as much as you probably should, so you say whatever, and you start the day, and you get productive, and you're like, hey, an extra hour to get some work done, I can live with that. So let's see, on the TFT side of things, PBE is out. Seems like a couple pretty big bugs, kind of warping perception of things a bit. One of the more common ones I see is, man, these prismatic traits are way too easy to hit. And it's like, well, yeah, because literally the one everyone's hitting is incredibly bugged. Oops, Or the Wraith bug one, which I think might hold the record for the most reported bug of all time. But despite that, it's funny thinking about what are some of the buggiest PBEs we've ever had. And I'll always go back to, I think it was set 2, where at least you can see the health bars. Because, man, that week of PBE for set 2 where we couldn't see the health bars, that was a wild trip. So anyway, I at least was able to get one game in last night, and it was good enough to be a tuber, so that'll be up by the time this goes up. But yeah, I am hoping to find more time to play, but may not be able to, especially because it looks like I won't be able to stream this weekend, or at least if I do stream this weekend, it'll be like Sunday afternoon only. So we'll see. But yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying, though. It'll be interesting. Like I said, I wish I could get in there and tinker, but I can't. So yeah. All right, let's dive into questions. I'm starting to get caught up on questions, which is good. So except for the 2 I've been holding back for a long time on. All right. Do you see a place for more social mini games in TFT? And the comparison this person brings up is the Tom Kench fishing minigame or the gold splitting that we did before. The answer, I think, is both yes and no, which I know is a cop-out answer. I don't mind the social minigames. I think they make you smile and they go, that's neat, right? Like the Tom Kench fishing minigame, for example, is like, it's silly, it's cute, it's fun. But there's a part of me that abstracts it down to, well, what's actually happening here? And what's actually happening is it's basically just an event that goes, here, have 10 gold, right? Like, PvE rounds, for example. If we took a PvE round, which the intention of a PvE round is to give you 3 items and 6 gold, and then we said, hey, do a social mini game where instead of 3 items and 6 gold, it can be anywhere from 2 items and 2 gold to 4 items and 10 gold, based on how that social mini game goes. Can we do that? Yeah. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just, what is it really adding? Are we excited to see Worlds competitors play the fishing mini game? Probably not. But is it fun? Yeah, it is. It is fun. It makes you smile, right? And so, to me, the social mini games don't necessarily add a depth of gameplay mechanics or anything like that, but they do make you smile. And so, I think when there are thematic moments where it would make sense to do so, I think that's a good tool in our toolbox to add novelty to the set. But I think that novelty wears off very, very quickly. Now, to its credit, the gold splitting, I think, is probably the most effective version we've done of that. The moments where something happens that's pretty unexpected. For example, I probably saw the split at least 200 times over the course of the set that I played. And in those 200 times, I can think of one time where I saw no player split. Maybe 3 times I saw 1 player split. And then 1 time where all 8 players split. And like those moments are memorable. It's like, oh, that's funny that we all did that, right? It created some good moments. Whereas if you compare that to the Tom Kench mini game, it's like it all kind of abstracted. We ran around, grabbed some fish, and there were rewards. Do I really remember any like peaks or valleys around the Tom Kench mini game? Not really. It existed. Cool. And so that's why I think the gold splitting one is fun. And if we were doing any future social engineering or social mini games, I would expect them to have those sort of peaks and valleys. But at the same time, again, go back to our worlds comparison where it's like, imagine if there had been a gold split of the 10-50 and one person split at worlds and got 50 gold while everyone else got 10. Do I think players watching would have been happy with that being the deciding factor of worlds? It would have been... It's like right on the edge, because you could say they make a skilled decision and a risky play, but I don't know. So, and these are some of the tough decisions we have to deal with sometimes when adding things like this. It's like, is that really the right avenue to be adding? I'm not sure. But like I said, I will at least give credit to the split game where it's like, those peaks are fun. They definitely make you go, whoa. And that's all TFT is in an abstract view, is a series of exciting interactions and memorable moments brought to you by the combinations and permutations of the champions, augments, items, etc. So, TLDR of your question here is, do I think we can do more? Yeah, I do. I also don't think it's something we should be doing every set. It's something we should do once in a while to make you smile. So, yeah, there you go. All right, this question is an interesting one and a fun one. Should DLC be the best part of a video game? And this question is coming out how there are certain parts of a game that come out later and that they're really, really good. But if you bought the game initially, they make you feel like you don't get the complete package. And so that's not really fair. Okay. So this is a complicated question. And the problem is the answer is decided by intent. And it is hard to understand and trust intent. And what I mean by that is the concern here is the greedy, evil corporation that has a video game and then chops off 20% of it and sells that as DLC, and then, to try to make more money, which sucks, right? The old days of getting a complete video game are gone. Do I want Chrono Trigger to have to pay for extra endings as DLC, or Super Metroid to add an extra area to play in as DLC? No, I want a complete game just like you do, for sure. So, ideally, DLC should not be separate, but this is why I say intent and actual events matter. If you take a game like, I think one of the examples listed was Hollow Knight. When Hollow Knight was released, that is somebody who made a game, and that was a complete game, right? Like that was a game that was good, you shipped it, you were happy with your purchase, there was no greed going on there, right? Like they made a game. And then what happens is, and this is natural, this happened, I got taught this at Nintendo, but this is also just natural human tendencies, is when you make something, you get experience. You learn what worked, you learn what didn't, and you get better at it. It's one of the reasons that, I've got younger designers on my team who are better at implementing, have good work ethic, etc. But that lack of learning experience makes a difference. Experience matters heavily, okay? And the reason I bring this up is, imagine you're on Hollow Knight, you worked on Hollow Knight, you made a bunch of bosses, you made a good game, you learned what worked and didn't. And then you're like, man, I loved that game. Let's add to it. Let's make players happy and let's let's add to that game. And we're going to add to the end of it and take what we learned and make even cooler bosses. And you do that. And it ends up being one of the best parts of your game. Is that bad? Hell no. That's awesome. That is freaking awesome, right? Like, that the game devs cared enough to take a thing they made and make it even better, and the reason it ends up better isn't some, nefarious reason. It's because they got better at making video games. Literally as you make them, you get better at it. And that's great, right? And so I look around and I'm like, any game that's willing to just be like, here's some more free stuff, enjoy. That's great. Or even if it's not free, right? Like, hey, we spent some time making this extra stuff for $10, enjoy. Like, that's awesome. So I hold nothing against those type of games, and I'm glad they exist, right? In a way, I try to hold a lot of that same style to TFT, right? Where it's just like, why did we improve this or make this patch, or, because we could. People like me and Giovanni and Kent and the rest of the design team, we're usually just like, because we want to make it better. That's it, right? There's no nefarious reasons. But as the consumer, how are you supposed to know which one is which, right? And that's the big problem, right? Is if you don't trust any of the developers, because abstractly they're all evil corporations, then any DLC can look like it's bad. And like, why wasn't it there in the first place? But that's not how reality works, right? Again, going back to the Hollow Knight example, I certainly don't look at that and go, I don't know, you should have delayed shipping the game for 2 years to add the stuff that was later DLC. Like, no, that's insane. Now, the part of this that I'm like a little scared to even talk about, but whatever, I'll just bring it up. I think one interesting example of this is fighting games. You look at stuff like Smash Brothers and Street Fighter, where essentially what happens is you make the fighting game, like let's say Mortal Kombat 1 or Street Fighter 6, and you release it, and it's a solid package. It's not necessarily like genre defining, right? There's no 56 characters like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or anything, but there's good characters. And then they make DLC. And this essentially is a business model, right? It's like, in order to get the maximum value, those of you that really like the game, here's extra content. And it's right on the line, right? Because it's like, man, would it have been cooler if all that stuff was there at the beginning? Yeah, for sure. Like I said, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 had 56 characters, not 30 characters, then added more later. But again, at the same time, if you're a fan of that game, to be constantly getting updates is pretty cool. Smash Brothers for me was, hey, here's a new character to play with. Let's try it out. And that was fun. So DLC is a weird abstract thing. So again, the intention of where the DLC is and what its purpose is gets so muddied and hard to understand. So I will say, as somebody who played World of Warcraft, then League, then TFT as sort of my primary games, with some Diablo 3 mixed in, and Hearthstone and stuff like that, it's like being able to play a game that you really enjoy and continually get updates to that game is great, right? It's like the game doesn't end. You get to keep enjoying it. And you can kind of see when this falls off, right? Like, let's say you were somebody who really, really enjoyed Elden Ring. Elden Ring was the game for you, and you play it, and and you beat it, and you master it, and then it ends, right? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. But for the really, really diehard Elden Ring fans, would they appreciate more? Probably. And so I guess going all the way back to the original question, my answer still stands, which is, should DLC be the best part of the game? And the answer is, yeah, that's fine. as long as the intention was it's true DLC and not a greedy move to hide content and split it up for monetization. But as a consumer, you can't tell that. And so if you're trusting, you can get some good stuff. But if you're not trusting, it can all look pretty bad. So, yeah. And again, one of the examples listed was Hollow Knight. I have no qualms with Hollow Knight's DLC being great. Because again, that's a game dev who got better. So yeah, there you go. All right. With roles revamped in TFT, will we see more off roles? This is champions doing things that they don't normally do, such as Leona the 5-cost who summoned a laser, or now Braum the 5-cost wrestler, who is not a tank. Will we start to see more of those because of roles revamped? So it might be disappointing to hear, but the answer is probably not. Roles revamped is a systemic change that makes the rules a little clearer, but abstractly, all it's doing is making the game intuitively work the way you would expect it, right? Like something that seems pretty intuitive is like dealing damage to enemy champions is good for me. Sweet, because before, well, it wasn't necessarily because you'd be feeding them mana. Or, hey, making my melee carry do more damage is a good thing. Well, it wasn't before because to make a melee carry work, it had to be a drain tank, right? Like, all it is mostly about trying to make the game more intuitive. OffRoll Champions are the kind of thing I usually say no to because they're not intuitive, right? We all joke about Kent's, ADC Braum, but it's very difficult to take Braum, who's carrying a giant shield, and then tell a player who's not necessarily a League of Legends, lore aficionado and say, hey, that guy's not a tank. You're supposed to put IE on him. That's weird. That's unintuitive. Now, that being said, the main thing that actually allows off-roll champions to exist is the skins and the thematic fantasies that inherently can make it look more intuitive. For example, Robot Leona carrying a shield still looks like a tank, and she's kind of bulky, but at least by being a mech, your believability of like Leona summoning a giant laser goes up a bit, right? The other thing is that in the 5-cost space, we can tend to be a little more push the bounds, right? Like a 1-cost that starts to set up your initial comp and is your first impression, that's a lot harder to do, but a 5-cost, you can bend the rules. Likewise, Braum, what finally made us go, hey, we can make a fighter Braum, is he's in a freaking wrestler outfit. When you look at a wrestler, you don't think, hey, he's going to tank and do a bunch of damage. No, you think he's going to fight, right? And the move that the team built for that Braum looks like a wrestling move. And your intuitive brain is sort of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. He's big and burly and he fights. Okay, I can put a bloodthirster on that guy. And so that's generally the margin for making these off-roll champions, is they do still have to be intuitive. And so, like, let's say you wanted to make Tank Yuumi, right? Like, is Tank Yuumi going to be a thing? It would need a lot of visual support for that to make sense, for me to take Yuumi and put her on that front line. And just because we have the roles that say, well, it says tank on it, that's not enough. That's not really enough. And so, hilariously enough, I think the biggest proponent of this is like when you see the skins of a champion, if those skins look like something that maybe bends those rules a bit, that's probably where there's the most healthy opportunity. So, dumb example here. If there was I don't know, and this is fake, this is why I'm not the lore guy. But let's say there was an Ashe skin where she used parts of Braum's bow parts of Braum's shield as a bow, and that was a cool lore thing, and so that we could use that shield and make her look tanky. Yeah, maybe we turn her into a melee thing there. Sure. But again, you need that sort of visual and thematic ties more than just the system itself to make that true. And hilariously enough, I think Melee Champions are actually like the most abstract version of this, because Melee Champions, it's like, you know, is Jax a melee fighter or is he a tank? Well, he certainly looks like a fighter, but Melee Champions always are like kind of in the middle. Actually, a better example here is Set, right? Like Set looks like somebody who wants to punch you in the face, but you know, sometimes we kind of need a tank and we have to bend those rules a little bit, but at least he looks kind of tanky. But in doing that, what we've done over time is we've eroded the trust of what a tank is. And you end up with champions like Kobuko, where people are slamming tank items on Kobuko in set 14, despite the fact he's literally designed to be an AP carry, you know? And if your design starts to get kind of unclear, then what ends up happening is the players aren't able to really understand the design intent there, and that can get messy, and they don't live up to their true fantasy, right? Like Kobuko was designed to be a carry, not a tank, but it didn't really, even after the rework, just because, again, the big extra health meter and things like that, and just his shape, people look at that and they go tank. It's like utility tank. That's what they see. So yeah, roles revamped is not really the barrier here. It's more the skins and selling the intuitiveness of the champion that I think is the big decider here. So, all right, this next question is in fact a question. Will we ever add anime girl horse racing to the carousel in TFT? Ever? Never say never. Yep. All right, next question. Thoughts on the Checkmate format? Oh, this is one that comes up every 4 months. And I'll be honest, the fact that we made it this long before the cracks in the Checkmate format really showed is wild. Pure coincidence, maybe. Skill-based game, maybe. But it took almost 10 sets for Checkmate to have all the cracks that people were worried about. Because however else, every other time, the best player with the most points, or pretty dang close to it, has won the Tactician's Crown. But this was the first time we saw someone go from last place to winning in 2 games. So this is a tough question, because abstractly what you have to do is think like a game designer for a second. If you're designing a rules for an event, for a competition, the question is, you get to decide what is the skill test you're evaluating and what are the goals of this system, right? And, you know, let's take the Super Bowl. And that's the other thing, by the way. There are so many competitions out there that if you do a little research, you can think about this, and you can think about all the different ways people evaluate competitiveness and all the different things out there. But let's take the Super Bowl, for example. Does the best team always win the Super Bowl? No, of course not. They're the best team that day, right? But like, if you have a team that went 14-0 in their season and then made it to the Super Bowl and then lost, essentially their record is 18-1. Likewise, you have a team that went 9-5 in their main season and then made it. Their final record is like 15-5, and they win the Super Bowl and they're the best, right? Even though they didn't have the most points. Is that okay? Maybe, right? Like, it depends on what you're evaluating. And in football's case, they've chosen to evaluate who wins that particular match, right? Now, on the other hand, poker is one of those things where it's like, well, what you evaluate in a particular tournament, right? Like a single tournament, you can get your butt kicked pretty quickly due to a bad beat or anything like that. But they try to, over the course of many hands, over many tournaments, sort of evaluate your skill across multiple events, right? There's other competitions like NASCAR where it's like, yeah, they have the season's point earner, and that matters, but individual races hold more weight, right? Like, who wins the season versus who wins the Daytona 500? You know, which one matters more? Honestly, it depends. It depends on your evaluation criteria. You know, and so the reason I bring this up is that no matter what you choose, there is going to be someone that disagrees with your goalposts. You know, if we, let's say, for example, we switched from Checkmate to just like the basic point one, then the same people that feel the need to complain about everything will go, wow, that event was really boring. AQ1H was basically guaranteed to win after game 5, as long as he didn't go 8th. That was really boring. Yup, that's true, right? The internet has created a persistent need for people to point out the negative in any given trade-off. And so, you know, when you're evaluating Checkmate versus the standard point systems, the trade-off here is the hype of the event versus crowning the most consistent player. That's the trade-off. And no matter which one you choose, you can point to the other and go, yeah, but, because there is no perfect solution. And a lot of people, especially those of small brains, don't have the capacity to think in nuance and understand that life has trade-offs. So, is Checkmate the perfect format? No, of course not. Because again, it has trade-offs. Does Checkmate create hype? Abso-frickin-lutely, right? A game where all 8 players are in check and everyone's sweating every fight and it comes down to the last minute. That is a very hype way to end a tournament. Did the most consistent player win the event? Nope. That's the trade-off. You make that trade-off. And again, pointing out the other side of that coin, not particularly useful. And everyone's going to have their different evaluation criteria. And I think the problem also is that we have a lot of kids that frankly don't know how other sports work, other competitions work. You know, the favorite doesn't always win. That is just true of all sports. I always remember, you know, growing up in Washington State, there was the season where the Seattle Mariners broke the record for the most wins in a single season. So they were the most dominant team. It's like baseball's 162 games a season, or at least it was. I don't know if it still is. And like the Mariners had won like 128 of them, something like a 75% win percentage. And then they went to the first round of playoffs and lost. And I feel like if that was an esports team in Reddit, people would be freaking out and saying that the format is flawed. And it's like, what do you want, man? So, you know, when your team loses or the outcomes aren't what they expect, but that's competition. That's just how competition works. You know, everyone knows the rules when they sign up. Everyone knows the conditions they have to push for. Are those silly? Maybe. Maybe those are silly. Maybe they're not what you agree with. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And arguing about it needing to change, not particularly useful. So, again, what do I think about Checkmate? I think it makes for a very entertaining final day. That's what I think. I think it is very entertaining. I think it does not crown the most consistent player, but it is what it is. And it creates, like I said, there were fun stories, especially this event. It was like Wajan Iverson took 3rd this event without ever winning a single game. Neat. We got to see 8 people in check for the first time ever. Fun. You know, so yeah. And I don't know what it is, but the other thing with competition, and I think anyone who's ever played League should know this, but really any human should know this, is that competition tends out to bring out the worst in people, right? Whether you're a sports fan whose team didn't do well and then you throw something at the TV and break it, or, you know, I don't know what it is, but competition can bring out the worst in people. And, you know, when you're in that worst state, you like to have a lot of really hot takes. So it's best to not take too many of these hot takes seriously, right? Like the fact that Wajan didn't hit a Felios 3, therefore the game is bad. Like, chill out, bro. Yes, your favorite player didn't win. I'm sorry. Stop looking for excuses. That's just how competition works. There's a emotional maturity around competition that can be hard for a lot of people. And if somehow Bryce watches this, by the way, I know Bryce is probably the biggest disagreeer, but I also think Bryce is a really mature example of what I'm saying, which is that there's a trade-off. And in Bryce's mind, we should always be crowning the most consistent player. That's the thing he values. And like I said, that's fine. You can have that opinion. Like, he's not wrong, but, it's just, what do we value? And whoever's making these decisions, what they value is an entertaining finals more than crowning the most consistent player. That is a choice. It is a subjective choice that someone gets to make. So, all right, I got through all the questions today in 30 minutes, which is good. So there you go. Hopefully you guys enjoy PBE. Hopefully I'm rooting for the team to make it a final awesome, good product when it goes out the door. I'm going to go work on my paperwork and have another typical work day. So, yeah. As I mentioned, streams this weekend will be weird and light. I'll do what I can, but basically I'm hosting an event at my house. I don't want to talk about it quite yet, but it's a very fun and exciting event that I'm really looking forward to. So, pretty rare opportunity, and I'm not passing it up. So, yeah, I'll let you know probably Monday how it went. So, cool. All right, that's going to do it for me. Have a great rest of your week. Happy hump day. Until next time, take it easy.